So now that we have our project all soaked down with water, you want to really make sure you get all of these edges, because if it's dry it won't felt as well. You want to make sure that you get plenty of soapy water all over the place. So you should be able to see a little bit of water seep up when you press your hands down into it. It's going to be harder when it's a bit more thicker. So before I roll this up, I want to just tidy up some of these edges, because even though I have like these fun little wavy edges, I don't want there to be just random strands sticking out. So I'm just going to pull a few of these in a little bit. We have a few more over here. So like this one sticks out way too far. And it helps to just kind of feather it, pull it apart and feather it a little bit so that it really just gets felted right back over into the end of it. So now we are going to start the felting process. We're going to roll up our project with our pool noodle. And as you roll this up, you want to make sure that it stays relatively flat, because as you roll it, you're going to see it start to try to bunch up in here, and you want to try to avoid that, because otherwise you'll get creases in your project. So I might even just pull this out a little bit. And get another there. So even when you lay your project out, it's going to help if you keep your stuff in towards the edges a little bit, because once you get to this part where you're rolling it up, you'll have a little bit of room to just pull your project forward so that it doesn't get all wrinkled. Okay, there we go. So let me just roll that the rest of the way up. And at this point, now I'm going to roll it up in my towel. Start from this end. And it's going to look like a big Tootsie Roll when you're done with it. Or a sausage. It's a roll, so. And there we go. Now, this is the fun part. Not this part. I'll rubber band it really quick. So we're just going to take our ends and put a rubber band around it. And this one's too small. Helps to stretch. Put a rubber band around one end. And then I like to put just one more in the center. Okay, so that just kind of keeps everything all in place. Now from here, if you're fully prepared for a workout, this is where the felting process begins. Now, you can do it one of two ways. So at this point, what I would start doing is just start rolling it. And you want to apply firm pressure and roll all the way to your elbows to get a nice good roll. And you would do this roughly, probably about 100 times. Just 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. And then you would rotate it, quarter turn, and do it again. Now, you can certainly keep doing this. I would say you'd probably want to do it anywhere from like 300 to 400 times, just rolling it. And then what I like to do is a little simpler. I actually just stick it in my dryer. So when you put it in your dryer, if you have a front door dryer, which I think most dryers are, I don't think there's any such thing as a top load dryer. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you can put it in your dryer so that it tumbles, and the tumbling will create the felting for you as if you were rolling it. Now, very important, if you are going to do it with this, you're going to put it on air fluff and no heat. We don't want heat on this. The heat is not what felts it. It will, however, cause some interesting things probably with your bubble wrap and your rubber bands. So I like to put mine in for 10 minutes at a time. I have done it for 20 minutes at a time just so I don't have to take it out and futz with it as much. But when I do that, it tends to felt too much. So, okay, so we've had our first scarf in the dryer for about 10 minutes. So we're going to just check on it and then possibly rearrange it. Take all the ties off. It from this side, because when I go back and I roll it back up again, I'm going to want to do it from the other side. So I'm just going to take this top layer off. You see how it's kind of sticking a little bit? This is why we only put it in for 10 minutes at a time, because I've used tulle and I've used this stuff, and it seems like no matter what, it just kind of likes to attach to the mesh at some point. So just be very careful when you're tearing it away from the edges. There we go. So you can already kind of see we have a few of our little holes forming here. We have one here, one here, and the thing that we're looking for is that the fabric actually like comes together. So if I can pull it apart, so this is starting to felt right in here. You want to see that it tents like that, or you can make a tent out of it. So that's really good. So I've released this side and I've checked on it a little bit. So I'm going to lay this back down. And I'm going to actually flip this over. Get this all rearranged again. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to release it from this mesh to make sure that it doesn't felt to the mesh. Mesh back over it. And then we're going to stick this in for another 10 minutes. Okay, here we have our second scarf where we used just the clouded fiber. So we're just going to check on that one. We're going to check and see how the edges are felting. I did end up putting this one in for a little longer. You see how loose that ended up being? We had so many air bubbles in there, and now it's kind of compressed down a little bit. Interesting sliding coming around in here. There we go. We have a little bit of sliding, but the good news is now that that's out of the way and everything's kind of compressed down a little bit, we can fix it. Kind of see our edges. Our edges are coming along real nice. So I'm just going to do the same thing and release all these edges. And we're going to just spread out some of these little creases too. I don't want those in there. And we've got some holes, some cobwebbing happening in here as well. Now, it is feeling a little dry, so you can see there's still kind of an air bubble here, so that's a dry spot. We are going to soak that down a little bit more. And we'll just go ahead and flip this. There we go. And at this point, I don't necessarily have to wrap the edges again, but I think I am going to, just to make sure we get those really nice, clean, pretty edges. Okay. So now with the fibers that don't felt as well, so like this is all alpaca, and I've probably had this in for about 40 minutes, just tumbling, while the first one I only had to do 2 10-minute runs, and this one, even though there's places of it that's felting together, but it's still kind of pulling apart bit by bit. And then I'm also finding that I have some weak spots. So I'm going to show you how I patch things a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how to patch some of these thin spots where it's not coming together as well. So I'm going to take some of my white, because this is, I'm finding, is felting a little better. I'm just going to fluff it up. And then I'm just going to lay it over some of those areas. So right up in here. And where do we have some more thin spots? Got a little bit there. And then I'm just going to go to each of these spots and just wet it down. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this in for another 20 minutes, because at this point it's all tacked down enough to where it's not going to stick to this mesh as much as it was the first time through. So we've unwrapped our third scarf. Now this is why we only put it in for 10 minutes at a time. So because we had all the air bubbles, and even though I tried to wrap it nice and tight, because we had all those air bubbles and it was hard to get the water all the way through, it bunched up. So I'm glad that we only had 10 minutes of felting instead of 30 minutes of felting on this one, so that we can make sure that everything is where it needs to be. Okay, so now the string is actually felting down in some of these areas. So I think we're going to try and just keep it where it's at, and we're just going to put this back down. Now what I might do is I might just pull and release and maybe cross over in a couple spots here just to see if we can get it going. So I'm liking how this is looking. I'm just going to rearrange my locks a little bit so that my locks don't get all caught up in the fiber. Alright, and we have some of these creases happening again, so we're just going to work those out a little bit. Okay, so we're checking the status on this one again, and this string, like, it felted fairly well on the one side, but the other side where we got bunched up at the beginning didn't really stay. So I'm just going to pull this off, and hopefully we'll try this again some other time, which is a bummer because it looked really cool. But that's okay. Like, honestly, you kind of just have to be open open for experimentation and for things to happen. Okay, so we're back with our alpaca scarf, and this is after 30 minutes, and I think I'm finally at a point where I feel comfortable moving on to the next step with this one. So one of the big signs is while it's sopping wet, if it's stretching under its own weight, you know you need to go back and do some more. So at this point, now there's still some thin spots, so it could be considered a cobweb scarf. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to intentionally make it into a cobweb scarf. So because there's no like super obvious natural holes, this is the part where you can make your own. So I see there's a little bit of a thin spot here, so I'm just going to stretch it a little bit and stick my finger right through it. I'll do that in a few different spots. Now the next part, this is kind of where your arm workout comes in, and with this one you're going to want to be a little bit more careful, but this is called the fulling process. So you're going to want to make sure that it's still nice and wet, and what you're going to do is you're just going to bunch it up and slap it down. And you want to do this several times. Some people recommend counting to 100. I just kind of go until I feel like it's good enough. So what you're looking for is you're looking for shrinkage. So at this point, you may not have noticed it shrinking too much. This is where most of that shrinkage occurs. So every couple of times you can pull it apart and you can see almost that like bunching coming together that you'll see in a lot of felted garments. And that's really what pulls this whole thing together. So we can start the fulling process on this one. Now the nice part about this is you have a lot of wools in here that will felt really, really well. So you're actually going to see more rippling on this one than you did the other one. So we haven't had too much shrinkage up until this point, so this is where that really begins. So you're starting to see some of that rippling that you see in a lot of felted scarves. And every once in a while, if you want to try and preserve the shape, just stretch a little bit as you do this. So we're going to keep going for a while, and we'll come back in a minute. Okay, so we have gone ahead and thrown our scarf around for a while, and you can really see a lot of that rippling happening. So here's the part where we really work those out. And I like to have my bubble wrap on both sides, just so we can work both sides at the same time. And I think I need a little bit more water here. Okay, so I've gone back and forth between the two methods of fulling, and then I also did a third type where basically I just would take the scarf, fold it over on itself, and rub it this way as well. But again, make sure that everything is nice and wet. But what I like doing is just putting my hand over some of these holes, the points that I think are a little bit weaker, and then I'll just work those areas a little bit more, because these edges are nice and solid. It's these cobwebby parts that I really want to accent and make sure that they are sturdy. So you can see just how it really pulls the fibers together so that they're a little bit stronger in those sections. Because in the end, it's like all these little cobwebby holes, it's kind of what we were looking for in the first place anyways. But we want to make sure that they're sturdy, and we want to make sure they're strong. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend go hanging off of a building with this scarf, but it'll hold up for your everyday wear. So at this point, once I feel satisfied with all of the different spots, what I would do is I would then wash this and rinse all of the soapy water out, and I would alternate between hot water and cold water. And when I squeeze the water out, I want to squeeze, don't wring it, because if you wring it, you can warp your scarf and it will just distort it in different spots. So make sure that you squeeze, don't wring. And then once I'm all done with that, you can either like throw it in your wash machine and spin it out, or you can actually just wrap this whole thing up in a towel and then just press the water out. So let's finish up our third scarf, and then we will come back and we'll see the results of all three.